There's something different about Route 50 when there's no moon. It's like the darkness is thicker, heavier. I've driven there dozens of times, but it wasn't until that night, near Ely, Nevada, that I noticed something I'd never noticed before. The mirror wasn't synchronized. Not the one on the outside, but the one on the inside, the rectangular one on top of the cab. It always reflected the road well, but that night, it seemed slowed down. At first I thought it was just my imagination because of fatigue or the glare from the headlights, but then it became clear. What I saw there happened later. I noticed it first when I was on a curve. In the mirror, the curve hadn't ended yet, but from the front, I was already going straight. I looked again, and it corrected itself, but with a second or two delay. I thought it was some problem with the vibration, the fixation, maybe. Until, out of nowhere, I saw an ambulance passing me in the mirror. With its lights on, coming fast. I looked in the door mirror, nothing. Empty road. Only the inside mirror showed that white ambulance. 15 seconds before I actually heard it coming. It was like a reverse replay. As if the mirror showed what had happened before, and reality came later. When the ambulance actually passed, it was identical. Same fleet number. Same noise. Same driver. At that moment, my stomach sank. This wasn't delay. It was anticipation. I started paying attention to everything the mirror showed. Cars, headlights, figures. And then things got worse. Because at 2:11 in the morning, the mirror reflected something that hadn't happened yet, a pickup truck overturning on the shoulder of the road. I looked around. The road was empty. Everything was silent. But less than a minute later, I heard the tire blow out and the screams. The same truck, a blue Chevy, flying off the road, just like I had seen. I got out, ran to help, called 911. When the ambulance arrived, it was the same one as before. With the same number. That was when I truly understood. The mirror showed scenes from the future. But only on pitch-black nights. And always bad things. I spent the entire next night testing this. I turned off all the interior lights in the cabin, covered the dashboard with a dark cloth, and focused the mirror. And it was still ahead of schedule. It would show, for example, approaching headlights, which only really appeared seconds later. But then it started showing things that shouldn't be there. I saw a deer standing in the road. I looked ahead, nothing. 12 seconds later, it appeared and ran. I also saw a gas station on fire. But there was never any real fire. In the reflection, everything was in flames. In real life, the station was empty, abandoned. The worst part was when I saw myself in the mirror, with a bleeding nose. But I was fine at that moment. Until a rock, loose from a truck in front, hit the windshield. I was so scared that I hit my head on the roof of the cabin. My nose was bleeding, just like the reflection showed before. That's when I decided to cover the mirror with black tape and cloth. I thought it was best to ignore it. But even covered, sometimes I felt like there was something moving behind there, like an image trying to form through the fabric. A few days later, another trucker called me on the CB radio. He said he saw me passing by and that something strange was on my inside mirror, like a white blur. A figure. I hadn't even taken the tape off. When I stopped at the next gas station and removed the cloth, the mirror was fogged. On the inside. Like someone had breathed very close to it. And in the center, a scratch made by a finger, almost imperceptible. One word, watch. Since then, it doesn't just show accidents anymore. It shows places. Faces. Sometimes, my own face, sleeping. Even when I'm awake. Now, I only drive during the day when I'm on Route 50. If I have to cross at night, I cover all the mirrors, turn off the radio, and don't look at anything that reflects. Because the last time I looked, the mirror showed my truck flipped over on the embankment, on fire. It was midnight. The image lasted for 3 seconds. So far, nothing has happened. But it's like it was marked. Like the mirror showed the end that hasn't come yet. I just hope I'm not behind the wheel when it decides to set the time. There was one last time I looked. It was about 4 months ago. A moonless dawn, coming back from Utah empty. I was curious, tired, and in a kind of numb state. I took the cloth off the mirror for just a few seconds. First, nothing. Then, just the back seat, empty. But then the image started to blur, and a man appeared standing on the shoulder of the road. No face. Just a dark silhouette. In the image in the mirror, he raised his arm and pointed straight at me. The detail that made me freeze, I hadn't even passed him on the road. Exactly 15 seconds later, I passed by. The figure was there. The same. Standing still, staring. I didn't look up. I didn't honk. I just kept going. Since then, not even with tape or a cloth, can I silence the mirror. Because now it fogs up on its own. It shows whatever it wants, whenever it wants. And what it's been showing lately are no longer accidents or isolated scenes. They're sequences. Like a movie. As if you were telling me what's going to happen. As if I were getting ready. What if that's true? What if all reflections are just warnings? Of what? Of something that can't be changed? That what's coming has already happened, it just hasn't arrived yet? I know it sounds crazy, but that mirror is no longer a piece of glass. It's an eye. An eye that you see before. And that charges a high price for it. Maybe that's why he doesn't show the present anymore. Maybe because my present has already passed. And I just haven't realized it yet. Today I keep the mirror turned up so I don't see anything. But sometimes, in the reflection of the windshield, I still see flashing lights. And today, for the first time, he showed me a clear picture. A curve. The truck overturned. And a body on the asphalt, face down. With my jacket. And my broken watch at 2:11. I saw an ambulance before I heard the explosion. It came 15 seconds later. I can't explain the kind of silence that exists in the Louisiana swamps at dawn. It's different. It feels like the whole world is holding its breath. I've been there many times, but that night was different. The air was thicker, the windows were fogging up on the inside, and the radio started to crackle without anyone talking. I thought it was just the humidity, the strange heat, or interference from the bushes, but what happened next came from somewhere else. It started with a low, steady hum coming from the side window of the cabin. Like a hiss. Like static. I pulled over to the side of the road to see if there was a problem with the insulation. I opened the window a little and the sound stopped. I closed it again and it started again. But now, with voices. At first, it was just a garbled whisper. Like a conversation that had been picked up by mistake. But over time, the words became clearer. I started to hear short phrases, lost in the hiss. Do you remember me? Stay a little longer, we're still here. And then came the biggest blow, one of the voices called my name. But not the name I use today. It called the nickname that only my grandmother used when I was a child. I froze. No one called me that anymore. It was a silly name, one I'd left behind decades ago. And that voice, it was hers. Or at least it seemed so. Low, soft, a little scratchy. I stared at the glass as if it were an old radio. But there was no image, no figure. Only the sound, clearer and clearer, coming straight from the glass as if there were something inside it. I touched the tip of my finger to the surface and I swear to God, the glass vibrated. Pulsed. I got back on the road with the window closed, even with that annoying noise following me. I tried to turn on the radio, change the station, distract my mind. But nothing could drown out the sound when it came from the glass. And the voices started to remind me of more things. Situations that only I knew. A toy buried in the backyard when I was 5 years old. The name of my kindergarten teacher. And, later, a phrase my father said before he died. A phrase that no one had ever heard but me. And now the glass repeated it. With the same intonation. The stretch I was crossing was an elevated road, cutting through the swamp on both sides. Still water, full of vegetation and no lighting. Only the headlights and that buzzing sound accompanying me. At one point, I looked at the window and noticed something I hadn't noticed before. My reflection was delayed. When I turned my head, it took a second for it to follow. And when I stood still, it moved on its own. That's when I felt a chill run up my spine. The reflection opened its mouth, but mine wasn't moving. And from the reflection, sound came out. From its mouth, my mother's voice. I stopped the truck at the first indentation and stood there with the engine running, not daring to look to the side. That was when the sound of the glass changed. It was no longer a hiss, it was wind passing through teeth. Like when someone whispers with their mouth half open. The voice called my childhood name again, insistently, and mixed other voices with it, as if several acquaintances were saying it at the same time. There was a moment when I heard, "Open it, just a little." As if there was someone on the other side of the window waiting, to come in. I almost opened it. My hand went to the window button. But something inside me froze. I remembered something my uncle had said when I was a kid, about these swampy areas. That they keep what the earth no longer wants. And that sometimes, what was trapped there wants to get out with someone. I started the truck again, fixed my eyes on the road, and stopped looking out the window. But even then, the voices continued. As if they had followed me into my head. And the more I ignored them, the closer they seemed. I arrived at a gas station in the morning, near Lafayette. When I stopped, the side window was covered in marks. It was as if wet fingers had been pressing on the inside all night. Small, childish marks. Some were scratches. I cleaned them with a cloth, but they were back a few minutes later. And always in the same place. I went to a local car wash and asked to have the entire window replaced. The guy replaced it. He showed me the new one, clean and flawless. I got back on the road at night, feeling relieved. But as soon as it got dark, in the first stretch without lights, the buzzing sound came back. Since then, I've avoided crossing the swamps at night. But sometimes you don't have a choice. And every time I pass by, I know exactly when it's going to start. The buzzing starts like a pressure in my ear. And then the glass starts vibrating. I don't talk to anyone when that happens. I turn off the radio, I ignore the GPS. I just let the truck go. But yesterday was different. Because one of the voices wasn't from my past. It was my son's. And he's still alive. Sleeping at home. Or at least, he should be. The voice said, "Dad, I'm cold in here." Softly, amid the hissing. I pressed my forehead against the glass, trying to understand. And in the reflection, I no longer saw my cabin. I saw a dark room, with a child's bed and an open window. Outside, a swamp. In the reflection, I saw a small figure moving in the bed, as if shivering from the cold. But in the real world, the glass continued to show only the darkness of the road. When I got to the next gas station, I called home right away. My son answered, sleepy. But before I could say anything, he said, "Dad, I dreamed you were here, right next to my window." Since then, I've been sleeping with the glass covered on the inside. A thick sheet held in place with duct tape. But it doesn't do much good. The sound still gets in. And the reflections keep appearing. Just today, I stopped to sleep and, before closing my eyes, I saw something in the corner of my vision. A figure passing by outside the cab. I looked in the mirror. Nothing. But on the glass, there was a small handprint. With only 3 fingers. If you're ever driving through Louisiana at night, and you hear a buzzing sound coming from the glass, don't listen. If you hear a familiar voice, speaking lovingly, saying a name that no one else knows, cover the window. Turn on the sound. And don't respond. Because whatever is out there in that still water is not alone. And it knows who you are. Every voice seemed to call out to me. By the name they used in my childhood. I usually stop at the same rest stop on I-95 northbound, just past Savannah. It's a quiet, secluded area with good bathrooms and a large parking lot where you can sleep without being disturbed. That night, I arrived around 2 a.m. There was only one other truck parked far away and the rest were empty. I parked, turned everything off, and went to make up the bunk. The strange thing started when my proximity alarm showed movement, 10 feet from the door. I thought it was an animal, a raccoon maybe, but I looked out the window and there was nothing. I went back to bed. A few minutes later, another alarm. This time from the rear sensor, near the truck bed. I got up and checked again. Nothing. But then I noticed that the thermal camera, which is activated in night mode, was showing hot spots. Small ones, as if they were people walking. About 7 of them. All of them walking in the rest area, where there was no one. I went down with a flashlight and walked around the entire truck. Silence. But the sensors kept beeping. Soft movements. Always close, but never visible. I thought it was interference. Or a bad connection. But I got confused and, on impulse, decided to use the drone. I have a small DJI with night vision, which I usually use to inspect the cargo and the surrounding area. I raised the drone and started filming in 360 degrees. The parking lot seemed calm. But when the camera turned to the opposite side of my truck, I saw something that took my breath away, other trucks. Several. Parked perfectly aligned. Only they weren't really there. In the drone, they appeared. Live, all around, total emptiness. I focused again and noticed that one of the ghost trucks was identical to mine. Same model, same color, same stripe on the rear bumper. I stared at the controller screen for about 20 seconds without blinking. In the image, people were walking among the invisible trucks. But they walked differently, as if they were a little out of sync. Like dolls from an old video. One of them stopped, looked straight into the drone's lens, and smiled. The feed immediately went black. Black screen. I tried to turn the drone back on, but it froze. I went back to the truck, not knowing what to think. I opened my laptop to pull up the video from the automatic recording, but the file appeared corrupted. Only one frame managed to load, my truck, with someone inside. I could see it through the shadow on the window, on the passenger seat. But I was alone. The strangest thing was that the shadow was facing me. As if it were looking straight into the lens. From that moment on, everything that had been strange became wrong. The cabin started making a dry sound, like fabric being stretched. But it was coming from inside the cab. I tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't respond. Interior lights were flashing, sensors were showing signs of movement on the sides, as if someone was walking around the truck. I took a quick look out the side window and, I swear, for a second, I saw another truck parked in exactly the same spot as mine, on top of mine. As if we occupied the same space. It disappeared when I turned my head. I started to hear static coming from the radio, even though it was turned off. And in the background of the hiss, laughter. Lots of it. Low, dry. Every minute I stood there, I felt like I was being surrounded. Not by people. But by presences that were repeating patterns. Like echoes of past drivers who had stopped there and never left. Maybe trucks that had crashed, maybe people who had died in their sleep. I don't know. The air got heavy. I tried to drive away slowly, without turning on my headlights or anything. But when I looked in the side mirror, it showed the parking lot full again. All the ghost trucks there. One of them had a man leaning against the door, mine. I immediately turned my gaze forward. I turned on everything, the engine, the headlights, the radio, and floored it to leave. As I accelerated, the GPS froze. And a strange route appeared, with no name, saying only, "Return to rest." I ignored it. But as I passed the exit gate of the rest stop, I felt a jolt in the cab, as if something had jumped out. Or, gone down. I don't know. All I know is that, ever since then, when I stop at rest areas, the sensors continue to activate. Even in different states. And sometimes, when I open the drone app by accident, I see my truck. Stopped. In the same place as that night. I told 2 road buddies about this. One of them laughed, the other kept quiet. A few days later, the second one sent me an audio message in the middle of the night. "I'm here at a rest stop near Baltimore. My drone is showing trucks that aren't here." And the recording cut off with a dry noise, like static and metal creaking. I tried calling him later, but got no answer. Days went by. When he answered, he said he was fine, but that he never stopped at rest areas after 2 a.m. And that his truck sometimes appears in 2 places at the same time. I went back to the same rest stop weeks later, during the day. Just to clear up the confusion. Everything seemed normal. Same spaces, same layout. But on the ground, near the space where I had parked, there were tire tracks, deep ones. Like the truck had been parked there for weeks. Except I didn't go back. Not that night. And near the tracks, I found a drone lens cap, just like mine. I looked around, no one. When I got back into the truck, the proximity sensors went off by themselves. And the CB radio turned on, with my voice. Recorded. Saying, "See now?" Since then, I avoid stopping completely at very empty rest areas. I stretch to the limit or stop in cities. But I know that somewhere, that truck of mine is still there. Or a copy of it. Parked in that spot. And sometimes, when I dream, I see the cabin through the drone camera. And inside, someone is sleeping. Same model of clothing, same position. Sometimes, the face turns, and it's mine. But it's not a light dream. It's a dream that pulls. That tries to make me wake up somewhere else. So if you're driving down I-95 in the middle of the night and need to stop, that's fine. But don't turn on the sensors. Don't use the drone. And if you happen to see your own truck parked in the distance, identical to yours, don't go over to it. Just keep going. Because there are trucks that never leave that place. And drivers too. I set up a drone to film. I saw ghost trucks, identical to mine. It was on one of those back roads that cross Kentucky that I first saw that mailbox. I had exited the interstate to take a shortcut and take a more direct route to Louisville. A route that a colleague had recommended. Everything was quiet, almost no traffic, just fields and narrow roads. Then, out of nowhere, I saw an old sign with faded paint, "Rest Area, 1 mile." I thought it was strange, because the stretch was rural and there was nothing on the map. But I went anyway. And that's where I saw mailbox 619. It sat alone, on a low wooden post, right next to a rusty fence. An old box, dark green, with the number painted on it in white, a little crooked, but legible. I wasn't going to stop, but it had a strange feeling. Like it was the kind of thing you should ignore, but can't. The shoulder was dirt, so I pulled over quickly. And when I looked inside the box, there was a letter. With my name on it. All in it. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in a rounded handwriting, like an old school teacher's. To John H. Palmer. My name was correct. No address. Just my name. I took the letter, not knowing what to think. It was a thick ivory envelope that smelled like old paper. Inside was just one sentence: "Sorry for what happens in Denver. You'll understand soon." My stomach turned. Because I hadn't even told anyone that my next destination was Denver. Not on the radio. Not by text message. I walked slowly back to the truck, looking around. There was no one there. Nothing. No house, no workshop, no other box. Just the field and that road that seemed frozen in time. I put the letter away, started the engine, and drove away as fast as I could. But I couldn't stop thinking about it the rest of the trip. How did anyone know my name? How did they know about Denver? Was this just some crazy coincidence? But when I stopped at a gas station later that night, I discovered I wasn't the only one. At the gas station, I struck up a conversation with an older trucker, the kind who travels non-stop through the South. I mentioned the box, half laughing, expecting him to make fun of it. But he froze. He looked at me and said, "Was it dark green? Number 619? I nodded, and he pulled out a battered wallet. From inside he took out an envelope folded several times. The same style as mine. Inside was a note: "Do not stop at the Mercer County Bridge. 3:04 a.m. He said he had received this 2 weeks earlier. And that, out of curiosity, he had driven over the bridge at that time, and seen another guy's truck lying below. Over the next few days, I quietly asked other drivers. On forums, on the radio, at stops. Few people answered, but those who did, described the same box. Same number. Always in the same place. And always with a personalized letter. Some with warnings. Others with questions. One time, a trucker said that his letter said, "Do you still hear the music? Because they still do." He didn't explain what that meant. He only said that after that night, he began to dream about a radio tuned to a dial that never existed. In my case, things got worse 2 days later. I was just getting close to Denver when my CB radio turned on by itself at 2:43 in the morning. It had been turned off. And yet, a voice came out of it. My voice. Whispering, "Now you understand." I stood there stunned for a few seconds. I pulled over to the side of the road, shaking, with the letter still in the glove compartment. I went over and opened it again. On the back of the previously blank page was a new handwritten sentence: "You didn't warn me. Now it's up to you." I got back on the road trying to rationalize everything. Maybe it was some kind of prank, I don't know. But the more I drove, the more it seemed like the billboards, the electronic panels, were trying to tell me something. Generic phrases like, "It's not too late," or "Watch the signs," now seemed like personal messages. I arrived in Denver the next morning. Everything was normal, no accidents. But then I got a call from my sister. A cousin of ours had been in a car accident, at 3:10 a.m. local time. Right near the bridge. I've avoided that Kentucky road ever since. But mailbox 619 pops up everywhere else now. I don't know how. Once, on the Pennsylvania border, I looked over and there it was, tucked between a rusty chain-link fence. Another day, in North Carolina. And always with a new letter. Only this time, no name. Just the message inside. The last one I got said, "You shouldn't have ignored the first one. It's too late now." What first one? The one in Denver? Or was there another one before that I didn't notice? I started saving them all. I have a box in the back of the car with 10 letters. None of them have a return address. Some are clear threats. Others are almost poetic. There's one that just says, "Are you still awake?" And another that was completely blank, but with smudged fingerprints, like someone with soot-stained hands had left it. I showed one to a police officer in Amarillo, just out of curiosity. He told me to go to sleep and recommended a therapist. And outside the station, leaning against a pole, there was the same mailbox. Now, every time I see one, my head starts to pound. Literally. It's like a pressure builds up behind my eyes. I've tried to ignore it, but it seems like the longer I don't open it, the louder the radio buzzes. It sounds absurd, but some cards know what I'm thinking. I once wrote, "I won't open it," in my head about 20 times in a row, and the next card I pulled said, "You always do." I wish I was making it up. I swear on everything I want. Just today, I stopped at a rest stop near Paducah. I went to get a coffee, and when I came back, there was a new letter on the doorstep. Same envelope. Same old paper smell. On it, "You told too much." That's why I'm writing this here. In case something happens to me. In case I turn another letter into mailbox 619. Today I received a letter, "Sorry for what happens in Denver. You'll understand soon." I always thought people were exaggerating when they talked about the Black Hills on overnight trips. The mountains are alive, they'd say. There are things crawling among the rocks. I never paid them any mind. It's just a series of poorly lit curves and climbs. A beautiful place, even. But that night, after driving through the region and sleeping in a rest area near Rapid City, I woke up to something that took my breath away. My hood, smooth, freshly painted aluminum, was scratched. Deep. Like someone had dug their claws into it. It wasn't a common animal, I'm sure of that. I've seen raccoon, coyote, and even bear scratches on parked trucks. They're shallow, scattered, and kind of disorganized. But this, it was methodical. 3 deep, parallel marks that went from the top to near the bumper. As if a huge hand, or paw, had slid down from top to bottom with force. I went to look around, thinking I'd find tracks, footprints, disturbed earth. But there was nothing. Except for one thing, 2 small footprints on the roof of the cab. As if something had stopped there. I stood there looking at it for a good few minutes. The truck was locked, nothing had been disturbed inside, no sign of an attempted break-in. Just the scratches and footprints on top. As if it had been observed from above. I took a picture, of course. I sent it to a friend who is a hunter and knows tracks. He answered with a question, "How many fingers did it have?" When I told him there were 3, and they were thin, he took a few minutes and then said, "That's not from an animal from here." I laughed, but inside, something froze. During the day, I tried to forget about it. I continued on my route, as usual. But on the second day, at another stop, this time near the Wyoming border, I saw another truck in the yard. Its hood was white, clean, with the same kind of scratch. 3 deep, parallel lines. I walked over and the owner, a middle-aged guy, was already taking pictures. When he saw me looking, he just said, "Black Hills?" I nodded. He shook his head and replied, "4th time this year." And always, without sound. "I'm here." After that, I started paying attention to similar stories. On forums, radio groups, at truck stops. And it's more common than it seems. Always around the Black Hills. People who sleep in a pocket or pull over for a few minutes on the shoulder, and wake up with their claws on the hood. Almost always in the early hours. Almost always between 2 and 3 a.m. One guy said he woke up to the sound of metal creaking and, when he opened the cabin curtain, he saw a shadow sliding across the ceiling, but there were no headlights, no footsteps, and nothing on the ground afterward. On my 3rd trip there, I became obsessed. I installed a new dashcam, one aimed at the hood and one at the roof. I parked in exactly the same spot as the first time. I went to sleep with the feeling that something was going to happen. At 2:48 a.m., the hood camera froze for 6 seconds. Black screen. When it came back, 3 new marks were there. I didn't hear anything. I didn't feel the truck shake. But on the roof camera, I could clearly see the metal deforming, as if something very heavy had come down and gone up without being seen. I rewound the video several times. In slow motion, at the exact point where the hood disappears from the recording due to the blackout, you can see interference, a frame with 3 points of light in the dark, like glowing eyes. But only for a millisecond. I sent this clip to a video technician I know, and he told me it looked like localized magnetic interference. As if something had passed so close to the lens that it had erased the field around it. Except, with no visible source. Nothing natural. From there, something even stranger began. Even outside the Black Hills, I began to notice small scratches appearing on the hood during trips. As if claws were following me. In Texas, in Kansas, in Oregon. Always at dawn. I had never seen it happen, but at dawn, there they were. And the scariest thing, in the last scratches, one of the lines, changed direction in the middle of the hood. As if whatever it was, now, was trying to write. Or mark. Or communicate. Just today, before I started turning, I found a new scratch. Except it wasn't on the hood. It was on the driver's side window. 3 thin, long, perfect lines, and very deep. I don't know how it didn't break the glass. And the worst part, it was on the inside. I ran my hand over it, felt the relief, tried to scrape it off, it didn't come off. I grabbed a damp cloth, a screwdriver, nothing. As if they had been made with something harder than metal. And at that moment, I got a shiver, because I thought maybe it was already inside me. Ever since then, I've slept with the cab light on. And I don't drive through the Black Hills at night anymore. One time, I accidentally took a detour and ended up back there. The second I realized where I was, the CB radio turned on by itself. Just a hiss. And then a scraping sound. Very slowly. I turned it off right away. And yet, when I stopped for gas later that day, I saw 3 kids staring at my truck from a distance. One of them pointed at the hood and whispered something. I couldn't hear it. But they seemed to know what it was. I saved photos, videos, and audios. But the marks never come out well in the images. It's as if whatever it is doesn't like being recorded. Some images disappear from the phone. Others turn into noise. Once, I sent a video to my sister. When she opened it, there was only a black image, with the sound of heavy breathing. But I don't even say anything in the original video. Since then, I haven't shared it anymore. I just observe. I count the risks. And I pray that they never change direction again. Because last time, they started to form a number. If you're going to be driving through the Black Hills, especially between midnight and 3 a.m., do yourself a favor, don't stop. Don't turn off the engine. And if you wake up with marks on the hood, don't look at the ceiling. There may be footprints. And if there are footprints, it's because it's still around.